I think we are ready to start. السلام عليكم جميعا، مرحب بكم حضورنا الكريم في ندوتنا اليوم التي تعد من ضمن سلسلة ندوات المعرفية التي ينظمها برنامج دبي للتميز الحكومي في دوره كمركز عالمي للمعرفة والابتكار النسخة الرقمية للبرنامج. للتذكير ندوتنا اليوم إن شاء الله بتكون باللغة الإنجليزية. Hello and good afternoon everyone. We welcome you today to another one of DGP's knowledge webinars. Our topic today will be digital transformation. And when talking about digital transformation, you can't leave Estonia out of the conversation. A success story of a country that restored their independence 31 years ago. A country that has transformed the way we look at government services and the need to physically be there to get a service, where 99% of their public services are done online. I am Bati Nasr Al-Shamsi from DGP, and I will be your moderator today. And to tell us Estonia's story, our speaker for today, the Ambassador at Large for Digital Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Estonia, Ms. Nيلي, Liyusk. Please leave your questions for Nيلي in the chat, and we will address them as soon as Nيلي finishes her presentation. Thank you for joining us today, and the floor is yours, Nيلي.
Good morning, everybody. I believe it's a lunchtime already where you are. So I am greeting you today from Tallinn in my little bit boring looking office, but going to tell you some exciting ways of how we transformed our country that Putin nicely introduced country independence 31 years ago. You may wonder why it is me speaking here today, as indeed I'm from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it is definitely not the ministry responsible for digitalization here in Estonia. But in nowadays world, technologies, as we know, do not recognize borders. So this brings along a lot of opportunities, and today we will focus on the opportunity side, because digital technology is really allowed Estonia to become and to be much bigger than its actual size. We are only 1.3 million people, but you are very well aware of what a small size actually means to a country, and the Emirates has been an even better showcase of how actually a small nation can become big, as you have become even bigger. But of course there is also, I would say, a lot of risks that accompany with the use of digital technologies, and in nowadays world it's no longer the issue of only an agency that is responsible for digitalization. It's a common effort, it's our global effort to make sure that that our country has the needed skills and experience related to technological developments that do not often take place in our country. So this has placed, I would say, digital diplomacy higher in the agenda. And this is also part of my task, to make sure that Estonia sits high in global agenda, that we are visible, that we are part in decision making processes globally, but also to make sure that we get the information and knowledge that other countries do. And I am really glad that the exchange between Estonia and the United Arab Emirates has been very close throughout the past years. And it was just a week and a half ago, I met also my colleagues from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that were here in Tallinn. So I'm really looking forward to further collaboration and to do innovative things together. But I won't talk about my everyday job today. I'm going to give a short glimpse of the digitalization journey of Estonia. I understand this setup is so that I will mainly do the talking at the beginning, and then you can ask me questions. But I understand these questions will be taken all after the presentation. I want to also note that my first visit, or my first official visit, was also to the United Arab Emirates last May, where I also met with Dubai Executive Council, but also other organizations. And what I heard during the week that I spent in the Emirates makes me wonder actually whether my talk is even needed, because the level of knowledge about digitalization and including in my small country was very surprisingly very high. So I hope that you will hear something new, or at least you will hear my takeaway, but I am sure that several of you actually know quite a bit of what we have been doing here in the northern side of the world. I will now try to share my presentation, and I'm wondering whether you see it now. Oh, I did something wrong here. No. Could you just confirm whether you see my slide?
No, not yet, Nali.
Oh. I am sharing it though. Okay, let's try again. Okay. For some reason do you see it now?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Great. So we are going to enter Estonia. As it was already said before, Estonia is a very small country of 1.3 million, and this is actually the reason why we started to look into digitalization. So I would really need to start in the year 1991 when Estonia got independence back, but especially in 1993 when the browser was invented, and that browser made internet available. That was previously limited to academic and maybe some other smaller circles. It made the internet available to the masses. And it was actually because of this, I would say, lucky coincidence that Estonia got independent and the sort of the internet started to be available for the mass scale, that made really our government to decide that, okay, this is the way we need to go, because we are so small, we do not have enough workforce, so we actually need to have computers do the job for us. And this sort of inspiration partly came from one of our former presidents, President Ilves, and he has been telling this story also several times, so maybe you have also all heard of it, but Jeremy Rifkin published a book, The End of Work, where he predicted, basing on the examples of the United States, that technologies will take a job away from us, and especially, of course, those people that were working for factories or industry and so forth. So now, of course, we see that his predictions were right, but actually his predictions have been made to the benefit of our country. A lot of work processes being automized and streamlined in order to sort of optimize the cost, but also the time efficiency and of course resources, which is crucial for all countries nowadays, not only small ones. But this is the inspiration from almost 30 years ago, and indeed Estonia did manage quickly to transform its country and still leads, especially in public sector digitalization. For example, in the EU Digital Economy and Society Index, which is DESI, and you see it in the screen. I don't know, depending on how you look. For me, it is left top, left down, where our overall ranking in the European Union is 7th place. But when it comes to the digitalization of public sector, then we rank in the 1st place. Where Estonia falls behind from the leading places is actually the digitalization of our enterprises and the industry. There might be different reasons for this, but it also shows that actually throughout the 30 years of process, sort of the government has had the leading role in digitalization. And I will come also to this later to tell you also how actually the government, on the one hand, using the expertise that lies in the private sector, but on the other hand, also growing that expertise and also supporting our own companies. And this has been one of sort of the crucial factors in this development. But I will come back to this, because until now, for example, our society and our companies do face new challenges. For example, with the application of artificial intelligence, where also the government has developed some support measures. Of course, there are other indices that you can find here. I would say probably the more referenced one is the UN government survey and so forth. But I wouldn't like to take time with bragging on where we stand, because everybody can check it in this world of Google and internet. I was asked today to focus on two sides. First, how we have managed to transform our society, what has been important in this process, and then on the other hand, perhaps to showcase or demonstrate what we are up to at the moment. So first, I thought of doing it so that I will first show you all the services and solutions we have, but I actually decided to do it the other way around. So I actually start with principles, and of course, only setting principles and only setting regulations that and standards do not guarantee success in digitalization. And one of the reasons is that people are rather emotional in their decisions, and in order to build, let's say, the habit of using digitalization and sort of building the trust in digitalization, including what's the governments use, you need also practice. However, in very early days, in 1990s, Estonia did put down some principles and some regulations that sort of gave everybody an understanding, a common understanding, what we are supposed to do, how we are supposed to do, and perhaps what we are not supposed to do. And I would like to actually start with a very simple thing, and this is related to internet access and nowadays increasingly also to digital skills. It was made a principle that we cannot leave anybody out from the virtual world, and I know that this is so many times talked principle and topic, bridging the digital divide and so forth and so forth, but it is actually essential. And some of the big national, I would say, grasping or government-wide, nationwide initiatives really helped to bring technologies closer to everybody. One of them, and I am sure that you have heard, one of them is called the Tiger Leap program. It's still an ongoing program, but now, of course, they are facing new challenges related to how to behave in a cyberspace. But at the beginning, in 1990s, they were really focusing on connecting schools, libraries into the internet, and really organizing education in a way that students would also evolve together with technology, not spending perhaps too much time learning about special programs, I don't know, Excel, Word, but they would really integrate technologies, but also programming into their everyday teaching and learning process. The other program, it was called Look at World, and that was done together with the private sector. And the aim of that program was to make sure that every person knows how to deal with technology. These courses have been organized for free for everybody that has been interested. And of course, again, over time, the content of these courses has changed. They started with simple looking into how internet works, how to log into some of the services that government provides, and so forth. But now, of course, the issue is highly on cybersecurity and making sure that our people won't be used or robbed by all the different schemes that have indeed become quite more complex, and even myself very well aware of all the risks that are there, sometimes may still almost hesitant to click on a link that I probably should not. So it is also actually quite a complex process. The other
sorry, the presentation isn't in full screen, so if you prefer,
it's not on a full screen.
That's not in full screen.
For me, it is in full screen.
Is it better if I share the screen and you tell me where to navigate?
But you cannot see.
No, it's stuck on the first slide and not in full screen.
Oh, it's on the first screen.
Yeah.
Oh. So okay. So how shall we continue? What shall I do now?
Let me share the presentation. I have it already, and I'll navigate with you through the.
Okay, and then I will simply say next,
yeah.
and so forth. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I will stop sharing.
Yeah.
Okay. I will close it. How can I stop sharing it now is the question, or I stop sharing it?
I think I'm sharing the screen now.
Okay, now you are sharing. Okay, so I was on the fourth slide. Yes, I was here. Okay, great. Thank you. And I'm sorry for this. We have the saying that the shoemaker is without shoes, and I think this is what happens to a digital ambassador. It's technologically challenged. But the second principle I wanted to talk about here is actually around data, and this is increasingly more important, but also more challenging. And the challenge I will talk about later, but I will first say what we have done in our government. So we have made sure that the data that the government holds about the person, or any data that is being collected by a person, actually owns to that person. And this has been a very important sort of principle in building trust, take away some of the fears that the citizens may have. But why? But this concerns now the data that the public collects about the citizen. But what we see nowadays more challenging, and there we don't really have good solutions. And as you may have heard, the European Union is collectively working on this issue. And this actually relates to the data that the private sector collects about the person, and what the private sector does with that data. As we all know, the big technology companies, especially social media platforms, but also other companies such as Google or Amazon, for example, gather quite a bit of data about private people, and we don't really have an overview what has been done with this data. But of course, we are not today not talking about these challenges that we are facing. But why I am raising it is that increasingly we see that the people see digitalization or the virtual world as one. We have already come to an understanding or realization that people don't separate, let's say, different ministries and local level. They don't understand what things are handled by central government in Estonia, for example, or what things are handled by local governments. Perhaps it's the same way also in the Emirates. They may not separate what is a federal service, what is an Emirate level service, but the same way, increasingly people may not make a difference between the services provided by the private sector or those provided by the public sector, or the data being collected by private or by public sector. And that sort of where these borders have been sort of merged and will probably merge even more in the future, does pose challenges to the public sector. So the public sector, I would say, has to put even more effort in this issue than before. Of course, I don't know what is the sort of mood in the Emirates, but in Europe we see an increasing, let's say, concern among the public in digitalization, and we as governments have to make a bigger effort to make sure that everything that we offer is top notch, and that we also collaborate with the big technology companies to at least to try to make their activity also more responsible and taking into account the privacy and other regulations. But as next slide, please. As we already got to this sort of topic of data, it's not, as I mentioned, it's not only sufficient that a certain legislation is in place, because people also need to see or practice and really feel that what has been put in paper also works in reality. So what we did in Estonia, for example, at the beginning of 2000s, when we set the principle that the data is owned by people, we allowed every citizen or every person in Estonia with the ID card, and I have it here, with the ID card actually to log in sort of into my personal, let's say, space in the government, where I can really see all the data that the government has collected about me, but also how that data has been used. So, for example, if I am stopped by police in the street, maybe I have speeded or there is something else, they have a raid. When I log in with my ID card to our state portal, then I will see that there is a sort of a log. I will see that somebody has seen my data. Of course, I won't see that person due to privacy reasons. But if I am not happy, or if I have doubts or something, or I would like to know why my data has been checked, I can turn to a government and ask for that information. And there have been indeed cases where, for example, a police officer has lost the job because I think they were dating the data, they were checking the data of their previous partner's new partner, or something similar that obviously is not what they should be doing in their everyday life. So it's really important to set principles, but actually also to provide practical tools that allow people to test or to see at least that these principles are actually also followed by the government. And when talking about efficiency, as you have probably heard so many times, we have the once only principle that we follow also from the 2000s. And this is again a principle that is sort of very flashy and seems a principle that we all know, and we know it's good and we should follow. But in principle, it's actually quite difficult to implement, especially in the governments, for example, that have already the historic, I would say, heritage. They have their ways of doing business, but ultimately what it means is that that if one data or one type of data has been already collected by the government, let's say address, and that data is being stored in one of the databases, let's say population registry in Estonia's case, then this data cannot be collected by any other government office, nor can any other government office ask from me for my address, because they should retrieve that data from the population registry where my address data is already sort of noted. When it comes, let's say, to address data, I can also change my data because, of course, I can change my living place. I can change it, and sometimes I need to confirm. For example, when I apply for a certain service, all the data is filled in for me by the government, retrieving data from different registries. But sometimes I need to confirm it because maybe I have moved the day before, because government also doesn't update data on a daily basis. There is a certain process that needs to be followed to, of course, guarantee that the data is up to date, and so forth. And it's not a daily basis. It depends. It's different in case of different data, but these procedures are set. So now, how does one implement that principle? As I said, it is has been set in legislation in our Public Information Act from 2007. Before, it was in Databases Act, and this is actually a trend that we see in Estonia's government, that when we started with digitalization, it was really important for us to really fix who is responsible for the collection and maintenance of which data. So we developed the Database Act. But after a while, it was clear that this is no longer needed. It was settled. So we don't have a Database Act anymore, but its main sort of rules and principles are incorporated in the Public Information Act, and then specific acts devoted to a certain registry. So we have, let's say, an act on population registry, act on business registry, on land registry, and so forth. So how is this principle now implemented? I think we can go to the next slide. I won't even talk about it here because, as Butsi mentioned, all services except divorce and marriage can be done online. Actually, even the preparatory work for getting married or divorce can be done online, but only the final signature cannot actually be given online. For that, we still need to go to the office. But you can move to the next slide, please. Okay. Maybe we can go now to the next slide and then come back to that one. Okay, great. So I am sure that many of you have seen that slide so many times, but I have to come back to this because this is really a cornerstone and the base for everything that our government does, both central government, local government, but also private sector is using it. And actually any other organization that fulfills the security requirements. So basically this is an open source sort of, I would say, highway that allows to transfer data between different databases and information systems. And many times I'm asked, for example, okay, do you think it's really important to set this base, and or can we move, for example, to AI and Internet of Things and so many other things, and of course sort of pilot projects or one-time project and initiatives, of course, can be done. But when we still look at the public sector, and now I'm only talking about public sector, they sort of innovation and how the public sector digitalization continues, it is still, I would say, the most crucial thing to have the digital data, to make sure the data is accurate, up to date, that it's secure and so forth, and to make sure that this data also flows in between government organizations, but not only. And that's for the very simple reason, because to provide services, governments need data from different databases, and that is especially so, for example, when we are moving towards the live event-based services, proactive services, and so forth, that I will very, very quickly perhaps introduce in the next slides. What we can also see is, and I would say that this is an increasing trend, is also the cross-border use of that kind of data. In the European Union, we are sharing that same platform with Finland and Iceland. We are also together maintaining that platform, because alone it has become already too costly for small states like us. So we are developing it together, and we are using it also together. We are using that platform also for data sharing in some concrete applications, for example, digital prescription, when Estonians, for example, Finnish citizens can buy the medicine also in Estonia, basing on the prescriptions that has been given to them in Finland and so forth. And I know that there have been also some plans to exchange data, for example, between business registries between Estonia and the Emirates to sort of support our economic collaboration and activity, but this is still sort of at the very idea discussion level and has not been implemented. So this is sort of the one cornerstone, and the other cornerstone that has been very important for Estonia, and I'm sure you also know it, and now we should go back to the previous slide, is related to digital identity. And I would like to stress here that every person in Estonia has only one digital identity, but I can have many functions. For example, I am a citizen of Estonia. I have my card, but I may have different roles as Liljosk. I am the ambassador for digital affairs, so it means that I need to identify myself also in my current position. I have to sign documents here. I have to log into our systems and so forth. So in this capacity, my role is not as a citizen as Liljosk, but as my current position, Liljosk. I'm also a parent. I have a small kid. So, for example, when I have to see his development in a kindergarten, or I have to allow them to take photos or post photos of my kid, or I have to perhaps get prescription for him, then I choose my role as a parent. And for us, it has been one of these sort of crucial cornerstones to enable us to be really efficient and save time and cost. Of course, I am an old-fashioned person. I use the carrier in my ID. Most people in Estonia actually don't do that. They prefer either mobile ID, and the mobile ID, for mobile ID, one does not need a smartphone because it's not an application-based ID. But we have also a smart ID, and for that one needs a smartphone because this is an application-based ID. So I'm actually in a minority here with my old my old carrier, but the identity is the same. It is just a matter of the carrier. And there have been also some questions whether we are thinking of changing this system, and the answer currently is that we are not thinking of changing it, despite, let's say, the carrier being old-fashioned, and because people want something more convenient, but mainly because it works well, and we have really put it to use. We use one identity for both private and public sector services. It also functions as a loyalty card. I can go to the store and they know that I'm a good customer there, basing on it's all related to one identity. But of course, no data is being stored here just to make sure. It is just sort of a key that allows to cross-check data that is in different databases. That has also been sort of one of the principles here, but this is very much related actually to security, not to have a single point of failure. So we have a distributed sort of data, not one big database where we hold the data. So can we go please to further? I see that it takes so much time actually to go through these slides, so I'm going to be quite selective here, so to allow also some time for discussion that we have. But I would maybe like to point out some of the developments that, in addition to what I just said, that I believe have been quite crucial. And actually, one of them was two of them, or maybe I would even say three, all three of them that were introduced in 2000 have been important for their own ways. E-cabinet was the first sort of system that our government launched, where it showed that they are fully paperless, that they use for their government work an information system where all the materials are posted, where the voting takes place, and so forth. And I know that you have a much more ambitious paperless strategy program in the Emirates, and it's really impressive. But this was our first. And why it's important? Because it was important to show that government is also innovative, that it just does not ask private sector to step in, or the public to start now also being innovating and also taking risks in this virtual world, but it's also the government itself. But both e-tax and mobile parking that were introduced in 2000, and e-tax is, as you know, completely pre-filled, and it only takes a few seconds for me to see whether the data that government has about me is all correct, and I just submit. And both mobile parking were these solutions that people really use, because it's a challenge. People don't need government services so often. That's why, of course, it's important to get private sector involved and integrate some of what government does with private sector. But both of these, everybody needs to submit taxes, also companies and private people, and most of us need to park. So these were these two important services to get people in. I would maybe go to the next slide. And I would like to talk about one service here, but not because it's still quite pioneering in the world. Estonia is currently the only country having nationwide internet voting, but to showcase that one needs to be patient when introducing innovation. By 2005, Estonian population was entirely used to using digital signature. We were using electronic services. However, in 2005, when we introduced internet voting, first at the local level, only 0.8 of voters voted or used internet voting. Now, in last elections that we had in 2019, that percentage was 46% of all the voters casted the vote online. It really shows that there is a learning curve that perhaps people and also ourselves are a little bit more traditional than we want to think we are. So we have to keep in mind, and also not to give up when it doesn't perhaps fulfill our expectations the first time, because people need time to get used to new services. As it took around 7-8 years before it went into mass scale, and now we are at a point where we simply cannot return. So I would take as next slide. I would maybe even take one more slide. You can, thank you. So you can, of course, check the slides yourself and see what we did at some point. But here, I would like to point to something we did in 2017. And of course, then I will simply quickly talk what we are doing now. And then I hope we can have a nice discussion. In 2017, we introduced a project called Data Embassy. And in 2017, we also established actually a mechanism to manage some of our digital infrastructure together with Finland. So we are not dependent now only on our resources and only on our skills, but also on the resources of our closest neighbor and collaborator in this world, our northern partner. But Data Embassy project is something that has gaining ground ever since. So Estonia was the first country to keep some of its government data in the territory of another country, while all the ownership and maintenance of that data is still in our hands. And of course, this has been an increasing trend, increasingly more essential. The idea behind it was that if something happens in our territory, we would still have the continuity of our nation. And as we can see from the nowadays world's activities, this is actually quite a smart move from our side. And many countries do that now, but increasingly also international organizations that collect a lot of data from around the world, and they need to keep it somewhere, and not often they want to go to the private cloud. So this is sort of an innovation here, and I would like to perhaps even then to finish with what we are focusing now. Of course, it's not the work we started today or yesterday. We are moving towards proactive services and I would say event-based services. We have, of course, a service around registering a business, birth, but we are now working, and by birth it means, for example, that when a kid is born, it's automatically registered in at the hospital where most kids are born in Estonia, so they get automatically a identity number, and that identity is tied to the parents, and as the state knows how much money how much taxes parents have paid, they are automatically entitled to different benefits, and these benefits will go then automatically to the bank account. But of course, the only thing that we have to do there still is we have to choose whether the benefits are going to the mother or the father, depending on who will stay home at which period during the parental leave period. But we are also working on services related to moving, because a lot of services that the government provides and local governments provide related to schooling, healthcare, kindergarten, and so forth, but also voting, and so are related to your residence. So we are also bundling all these services. And of course, nowadays we cannot we cannot neglect the trends. AI and the use of AI in public sector is another trend, and accompanied also with the open source. So I would perhaps even like to end that. I have a lot of slides, you can go through them. I have slides for each service that we provide and so forth. But perhaps to conclude, I would like to point out perhaps two other important aspects. One has been, let's say, as I was already mentioning, the use of shared, let's say, services like ID, like data sharing platform. We have also shared sort of services for a lot of services that all governments need. Are they related to human resources, procurements, and so forth, but also cybersecurity. And the reason has been that not all municipalities, for example, are at the same level of digitalization. they don't have the same capacity. So it has been the role of central government to make sure that these crucial components are centrally provided to guarantee their security, integrity, and so forth. And this is happening also now with AI, because when we did our latest AI strategy, the one from this year onwards. So after the previous AI strategy, we're doing a study, and we found out that, for example, especially local municipalities and other public administrations are a little bit hesitant to start using AI because they are not sure they do everything right. Maybe, and it mainly related to legislation, because we have quite strict privacy, but also security laws, and they want to make sure they do everything right. So one of the things that we are doing, we are providing central support, sort of central toolbox of how to use AI in a public sector. And this includes legal advice also. But the other trend related to it is to open source, because a lot of solutions that we need in government, not only in one country, but across the globe actually, are quite similar. So we don't need to reinvent a vehicle. So I would say this other trend to have more open source and reusable solutions in the public sector. We started with X-Rows, that is open source and reusable, but we are now using it heavily also for AI, and our latest AI all governmental chatbot, which would perhaps in a way functions the same way as interoperable, these proactive services, is also going to be open source and reusable for everybody in the world to use. And we are also using some of other solutions that other countries have developed. Like, for example, for e-participation, we use Icelandic developed platform for crowdsourcing and so forth. So this has, of course, given more ground also for international cooperation, and I would end here actually in this note saying that we are actually moving in the world towards increasing necessity to cooperate, and we can see that digitalization has been very put higher also in a global agenda, and I'm looking forward to our collaboration, but also getting in touch in different global networks on digitalization. So thank you from my side. I think we managed to the slide 9 out of 30. So, but you can check the slides yourself also later. And I'm sorry, I think I took too much time.
We'd like to thank you, Nelly, for this great presentation. My first introduction to Estonia's digital transformation was when I was back in college. One of our professors showed us how Estonia's maybe years ahead of some countries in the digital transformation. And reading about the X-Road and the fact that Estonia managed to come up with that idea in 2001, when people used dial-up internet at the time. So that just amazed me. It still amazes me how Estonia is constantly improving in the digitalization. We'll take some questions from the chat. So this is an interesting question. We have a question from Mona. She says 99% of the services in the state of Estonia is digitalized. How much percentage of the judicial services is digitalized, and how is it managed? I think. Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, just to understand what is meant here by shared service. Is a shared service now meant, like, for example, let's say EID, that is a solution that everybody use, or is a shared service a service that, for example, requires getting data from different databases? Maybe you can just clarify.
I think she means the judicial services. I think that still counts as part of the 99% of the services. So you don't have to go to court, I guess, unless you you have the marriage or divorce to.
Yes, I would like to clarify that all services are still possible also in a physical format. And we have had this discussion whether we should turn to entirely digital, but we have not. Even though I do have to admit that it's increasingly easier to have access to information and services via digital than it is actually in a physical format. But what I wanted to elaborate perhaps on the shared, or I would say maybe also in invisible services, is simply that okay, let's say when the data doesn't flow, let's say between public administrations, then it is the person or the company or whoever uses the service that has to go through different steps of service. But when we talk now about the shared service, it means that automatically it is known what kind of data is needed to, let's say, fulfill a certain requirement, and the data is being automatically collected from different counterparts. So I think maybe to give an example to make myself a little bit clearer, for example, as you are from Dubai, and you may also, I don't know exactly how it is organized in your government, but for example, an application to organize an event. Let's say some NGO wants to organize or somebody wants to organize a concert or I don't know, a parade to support Ukraine, for example, which has been increasingly happening here. Then, of course, I have to make an application for this. I log in a portal, but now everything that is required from me, for example, is something that is not my worry. Because these confirmations that are needed, for example, from police, maybe from the board that deals with, let's say, when it's perhaps a territory that is under protection, then there is also ambulance, then there is also traffic regulation. All these things are automatically managed by the municipality itself. And in case there is some additional document needed from me, then the municipality turns to me and asks to do this. But it's not my sort of obligation to get these confirmations and things that have to be done. It is the municipality that does it itself in a back. So, but if we talk now about shared service as let's say an identity that the government provides, then it is a mandatory here to use it. So all government organizations or public sector organizations, they need to use it. There is no other way, simply.
There is one interesting question. So how can the digital transformation enables organization excellence and vice versa? So how does organizational excellence enable digital transformation? And I think you're the perfect person to answer this due to your experience with Dubai government entities and your experience as a digital ambassador.
Oh, this is a good this is a good question, actually. And I thought, because I have not worked for Estonian government for long, and I actually thought that it's easier than it is in reality. And I would say it's a combination of different things. But it's easy actually to talk how digitalization improves excellence, other than how organizational excellence supports digitalization. It's because how technology supports organizational excellence is easier because we know what governments need to do. We know that they need to provide these services. Let's say I'm the Minister of Foreign Affairs. We have visa services, consular services. We have a lot of information sharing, and then we simply come together and we think, okay, the technologies allow us to do things differently, right? People don't have to run around with in different offices, and we as public administration officials, we also do not have to get different proofs and because everything this can be automated. For example, I would say, let's say if I go to a mission, I have to get some approvals for funding, I have to get some offers from for travels and so forth, but none of it is sort of my worry. I'm only logging into our system, I'm writing a data that this is where I have to go, and it automatically sends notifications to every certain person that needs to either verify my mission, either the costs of it, or maybe my boss, or maybe the travel agency needs to send the ticket proposal and so forth. So I don't have to do don't have to do anything. But I would say that this is rather, if you put your mind to it, it's not so difficult. What is more difficult is actually the organizational excellence. So how we get to that level that we really want to do it. And we are also learning here still. We have tried different ways. Of course, we have chief information officers in every organization, and their task is also to motivate their people. We have there were times we introduced digital ambassadors in each office. We have centrally tried to promote and work really with different organizations. For example, the Ministry of Digitalization has many support teams. Also, the Agency for Information, the Information Systems Authority, that is the implementing agency for digitalization, they also support, but sometimes they do also salesman work. So they also salesmen. I remember when our X-Road was introduced, it was not so that our government officials wanted to all include their databases in the system, because maybe they were afraid, maybe the databases were not good. There are very humane reasons for perhaps not stepping into let's say digital innovation the first time you hear about it. So there was really hired sort of a team leader whose task was simply to go from one organization to the other, explain, work together, and do a lot of sort of motivational and PR work. But what we have to also admit, we have also lack of personnel, like every country nowadays world. A lot depends on a good project manager or a team leader, and it is often difficult to find. So we are also struggling with this. But one thing I didn't mention, and that is about political leadership. Actually, digitalization has not been a politicized issue, and this has been only good because everything that gets hugely politicized gets polarized and is not good for sustainability. But what I mean by it is that there was simply an understanding, and there is a common agreement that this is something we do, this is what we do. But it's not a matter of political discussions or debates. And that gives sort of a good ground for public officials to take a lead. So I hope that somehow I manage. But sometimes we also look for newcomers. For example, Ukraine has done an amazing job in previous years in how they develop their new solutions and systems, and also Emirates is a big example for us, how you really set big aims, you have a high ambition, and how you fulfill it. It's very impressive.
We'll take one or two more questions. This is another good question. How did Estonia address the challenge of public acceptance for data safety and security legislations at early stages?
I partly covered this. I think, as I said, there are two important sides. One is really to have the principles set, the regulation needs to be set. We have to know what public administrations can do, what they cannot do, how they do, who owns the data, and so forth. But trust is an emotional feeling, actually. It's not enough to say, oh, our systems are secure, we have legislation in place. Trust really comes also with practice. So we really demonstrated with giving access to people to their data, but simply through ongoing positive experience with digitalization, because it really has to sort of build itself through practice. So it's a long-term process, I would say, but it can be achieved, because we have also had our crisis here in 2017. Some academics said that we had a potential risk in our chip in the ID card, a technological issue. So the government said openly, we probably have an issue here, and we are asking you to change your ID cards. But there were potential questions. Okay, are people still going to trust it? But they did, because it's also important to understand that digitalization is not 100% sure. No solution is 100% secure, nor is it in paper. So this trust has to somehow be built.
I think we have a lot more questions, but I don't think we have the time to.
I should have done a short presentation, and we should have had a...
No, I think even if the X-Road alone needs over an hour of talking to give it what it really deserves. Anyways, I do apologize for not addressing all the questions. We thank you, Nelly, for an amazing webinar, and we thank you everyone for joining, and we hope to see you in other DGEP webinars soon. Thank you, Nelly.
Thank you so much, and I hope to meet you to answer some of the questions, some quite challenging that have been raised here. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.